Welcome back to 30 Minutes. My name is Ralph Galen, and we're doing another installment with Josh Alba, Laurentian and activist. And once again, I want to remind all of us that the 30 Minutes is not an expose so much as it is approaching subjects of common interest from the direction of appreciative inquiry to find out what is positively motivating people of all sides of issues, which sometimes tend to become contentious in the way that we conduct our democracy in Lawrence and in America. So, Josh, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah. There's a love having you as our first guest. You grew up in Lawrence. Mm-hmm. You told us about some of your formation and then how you left the city and mm-hmm. really discovered through the philosophy and program of Zeitgeist and participating in Occupy. Mm-hmm. You developed a broader philosophical, let's say, basis for your community organizing. And one of the issues we want to go into more depth is the charter school issue, which isn't just about lifting the cap on 12 schools, isn't about just acquiring a little bit more money, but how charter schools or how investing in more in our public schools is going to move us forward in the area of education. So I'd like to hear some more about what education. You dropped some names before, Paulo Freire. We talked about Herbert Cole and others. What do you think education is about? Reading, writing, arithmetic. Why do we send kids to school?
Yeah, so I got into education after kind of like in a natural kind of progression, unpacking my own oppression, right? My own figuring out who I am, and realizing that a lot of the systems we spend the majority of our time in school, right? When you're a kid growing up, that a lot of although I've had a great experience at Catholic school and high school, trade school, that there's a lot of internalized kind of oppression that takes place, and a lot of imposition that's just part of the cultural norm of how we're supposed to get ahead. And so kind of unpacking all that stuff, reading through, I was part of LCW, Lawrence Community Works, Poder Institute, under Alba who was my mentor for 6 years. She introduced me to Paulo Freire, and looking at that super leftist view of education and examining the current one that we have right now, that's the top-down model, the banking model, versus his prescriptions for something else, and kind of realizing that I didn't have that something else, maybe in isolated incidents and projects and maybe outside of school situation, you kind of realize that the reality teaches you a different way.
I get a little nervous when you say super leftist or we talk about the far right. I want you to talk more about if you would, about the universal needs of children and the educational process that somebody like Paulo Freire, which is neither, I think, left or right, but what we need to be human, right? Yeah,
so I realized through my own self-analysis and through his work, as well as many others, that we need an environment that is conducive and nurturing to failure and trying and...
You mean the stigma of failure? Getting over the
stigma.
Yeah,
we should celebrate. We should celebrate our failures. You know what I mean, as opposed to being punished for them. And because now we know what not to do.
I mean, the idea that we learn from our mistakes as much as anything. Almost anybody can guess. And if I tell you, I want you to ask me 3 questions. and I want you to guess a number that I have in my head between 1 and 10. And sometimes people ask questions like, well, is it 7? You go, no. But if you take a scientific attitude and you say, is it 6 or above? Ah, great. And so on and so forth, you can answer it in 3 times. Now, you've made mistakes getting there, but that's the scientific method, right?
Yeah.
Discarding the
Ideally,
false
that would be
leads
it, yeah.
and so on.
Purely, it is, yeah.
Ideally. So you'd like more of that, to see more of that critical thinking and the freedom to explore.
Yeah, and giving people a stake in their own learning experience, as opposed to just feeding them as empty vessels that you need to know this because of X, Y, Z, and I'm older and you're a dumb kid kind of thing.
And that's why you need to learn the leading export of Venezuela and the other 200 countries. It was easier when I was in school. I think there were only 90 countries. But that kind of rote learning is, especially today, something that I think you can use. I think it's called Google or one of those search engines.
To find anything.
Yeah.
It's autodidactic learning. That's what that is.
Does this have something to do with innate curiosity? Because I think we seem to think if students don't, if they aren't driven to learn, they're just going to sit there like slouches and
but the current model
read
that we
their text
have,
messages.
the current model of education that we have right now kills the drive to learn because it is such an imposition and because they don't have a stake in their own experience. They're not at the.
Tell me briefly what a 5th grade classroom would. I show up for school. I'm in the 5th grade. What am I doing? What might I be doing?
You mean in an ideal education system?
In this Pablo Freire's classroom.
With integrated classrooms with different grades. We'd have integrated age groups. There'd be project-based learning. There would be no grades. There'd be very little testing.
Give me an example of a project.
Instead of having separate subjects being taught, math, science, whatever, you try to integrate the subjects as much as possible because reality comes at you as one dynamic package, not isolated in silos with bells and whistles, noting that there's a separation.
Could it be something like this? The nation of Mali, only 1 in 3 people have access to drinkable water. How might we change that situation?
Experience-based learning, going out into the field.
Okay. And taking, even if we don't go to Mali, taking that situation is not something dreadful that's announced over the news, but something that we actually can impact. Something.
Exactly. Something real that makes a contributive participation, like in solving some issue, and then having that be the stake or the motivation to want to learn more, as opposed to just marking answers on a page and getting a grade as being the reward.
This sounds wonderful to me, and the most important things I've ever learned have been that way. Even when I go to a conference, sometimes the best things I've ever learned have been the things in the corridor, just kind of, I might say, accidental things, because I had a hunger to learn them, and I was open to listening to folks and not discarding them because they weren't given the precise workshop. So here we have our present situation, where public schools have not been doing so good. It's certainly the case in Lawrence. We're in receivership, and now you have people asking for a chance to send their kids to schools that are succeeding. The charter school issue, how is that shaping up? What is the charter school ballot issue that we're asked to vote on?
Yeah, so it's interesting talking about these education issues, and I jumped on to the charter ballot, being against the cap lift, being against question 2 through after I was having over a year's worth of conversation with students and teachers in Lawrence about public school issues. And then a lot of the charter school issues came up, and students came up to me to talk about their harsh treatment there.
This is part of Rogue Conversations?
The Rogue, yeah.
So just without actually going after them, students knew that you were available to listen to discordant voices.
Yeah, it was a space,
and their
a safe
complaints,
space.
their gripes,
Yeah.
and it was a safe space. And what did they tell you?
That they're being treated harshly, that they feel like they're being taught to be robots. The Lawrence Youth Council confirmed it. They did a survey of over 600 students, high school students across the city. I think it's maybe more than just the high school students.
What is the Lawrence Youth Council comprised of, please?
It's youth from across the high schools that are taking like a citywide leadership course, developing their own research and coming up with their own concerns and addressing them in
a representative
ways.
sample, you think,
Yeah.
of?
Yeah.
Okay, and some of them
For
are
sure.
in public school and some were in charter schools?
From all the public
or-
schools, the
all
high
the
school.
public
Well, I think
schools.
there's like one from like Central Catholic as well, so or a couple of them. But so they came up with a survey that said that over 600 students said that they feel like they're being robots, being taught to be robots. Like overwhelmingly, that was the result, and there was other questions on there as well. And so a lot of them came to talk about this issue. They've been holding their own forums and their own workshops to discuss this issue. And so, the charter school issue came up. The coalition, that is the Mass Education Justice Alliance, recognizes how Lawrence is going to be a flashpoint for the statewide conversation on education in general, because we're under receivership, but specifically for the, more pressingly, the charter school issue, because we're so heavily charterized here.
Do you think that the basic issues that were the problem with Lawrence sliding into level 5 and receivership, do you think they have been identified?
With the problems that we have, see if they.
Yeah.
Um,
Are we on our? That's the first step to solving a problem, is to identify.
No, yeah, I think that answer is not clear because we do not have local control over our own school system, and so I can't give you a definitive answer and say
But
whether that's been identified or
Isn't
not.
this what Jeff Riley, the receiver, is aiming to do, to find out?
There's been some improvements, but there
What did
are
he state to be the problems?
myriad complaints.
But what was stated to be the problems?
Well, they extended the school day and the school year.
So that was a problem, that
that-
students were not spending enough time in school,
That's
which is,
that's what you get when you have somebody that doesn't come from an education background.
well, why would that change the teaching, spending more time
Exactly.
in classrooms that...
It's an
where-
imposition on a poor community, saying that these kids need to be worked harder. It's bootstrap theory.
Okay, worked harder, there you
yeah.
go. So more teaching to the test, more
Yes.
pre-tests, more
Yeah.
practice in performing, like that.
And so we get the charter issue, which many of the charters came in under the receivership, like Up Academy, Phoenix, Spark Academy, and this is a separate system from the public school system statewide. Here,
Yeah.
we're all under the receivership.
May I say that surprises me a little bit, because here we have people like Jeff Riley who are committed to public education, and yet they create a charter school situation, which is taking money away from public schools
Yeah.
or not.
It is.
Okay, because you hear
It's going to be
about,
450 million statewide a year, 17.4 million at least from Lawrence alone
But
to the
we-
charter school system. Yeah.
but we've heard that the money follows the student.
So that's not
I mean, the money stays and doesn't follow the student, rather stays in the school system.
So the problem is that each the schools serve depending on what the population is, right? And so the money is allocated per school; it's divvied up, right? And so the problem that happens within the charter school system is that they're not taking all the students that they should be. It's not a representative sample
Well,
of.
let me stop you right there, because we hear about the charter school lottery, Josh. Is it a lottery or not? When I go to buy my
Having a lottery in the
ticket.
first place is an issue.
Okay.
Because it's public schools are open door. Anybody could go. Charter schools should be operating the same way. Through a lottery system, what
see.
happens is that the application process essentially discourages certain demographics from applying or from even having a chance.
Okay. So
Say
it's not as easy as buying a lottery ticket.
it's not a dollar ticket. Yeah. that you could just
Okay.
ask. It's
There's-
the interview process. There's pages to be filled out. There's
Okay.
prerequisites to be met.
So you're saying that there needs to be, if you will, maybe more inviting or an affirmative action that actually goes out and recruits, new citizens, and say, listen, don't be afraid of this process. This is the way that we do it, and actually going out and soliciting for the charter school to make it an equal application process. But that doesn't exist. It's people.
I don't think we should do that either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, the process is unjust. Because you get an immigrant family that can't hardly read English, has to go through this application process.
So isn't there a way to correct for that?
To remove the lottery system. That's easier.
But can't there be a bilingual invitation to these
So we're under
Vietnamese and Portuguese?
We're under the assumption that having a charter school system is an actual beneficial thing.
Right. I wanted to go back
and
to that,
operating
but I
on
was
that.
stopping you here at the gateway, the lottery. So you're saying the lottery itself is not amenable, is not a fair process.
It's not.
Okay. Were it a fair process, now let's go to the next step. Let's say that everybody who wanted to bring their child to this magnificent school, because where they came from, the only way to have a schooling like this is to pay for it, and they couldn't do it, or they had to, work, 3 jobs to do it. So now we have there in America, Yahoo, here's this private school, basically. The only problem is I have to apply to it, so I've applied to it. What's the problem?
We're assuming that the charter education is better, one. Arguably it's not. Public schools have been performing better for a long time now.
So where does I have to
So
say, where
I'll
does this
explain it
news
right
about
now.
the failing public schools and the criticism, I want to say also, that go to the teachers? Where's that coming from?
I guess I still need to explain the charter school situation.
Please.
Charter schools kick out students with disabilities and English language learners. They end up
Can I say?
counseling out.
Isn't that illegal?
They counsel out because they don't have the resources they don't want to give the resources to them to cater to them because they cost more.
But
And
I went to the charter school because I have an autistic child and I want more attention.
You could talk to one of the producers that has a disability that knows about the research about how they're discriminating against students with disabilities. They do it. Whether it's illegal or not, they do it. It happens.
Okay, it happens.
And so they're creaming the crop of students, just like in the lottery process, they're creaming the crop of parents that are going to be most engaged in their child's education, that these kids would be successful in any school they go to because they have the support structure to do so. So what happens is that the charter schools look like they're doing better only because they're creaming the crop, and the public schools are taking in the majority of the population, disability English language learners, students throughout the year. On top of that, new immigrants, new people moving to the area throughout the year, as opposed to the charters that do not have they do not.
I don't want to dun you on this point, but I want to put it out there so we clearly see what the mechanism is. So ostensibly it's a lottery, but you're saying that there are forces that mitigate against that. The application process is in fact keeping people away, and there's not necessarily a move to create an equal playing field. So it's not like buying your dollar ticket. And then you're talking about the ones who have been selected. There's not necessarily creaming the crop there. There could be a group of special needs students, but the filter happens retroactively. Once a student is there, they might hear the message, I really think that your daughter, your son would really do better. This is too challenging an environment, or so on and so forth. I think they would be doing better. And then for some reason, the parent kind of gives up and doesn't say, listen, you need to deliver the goods. I don't care what you do.
And there's no accountability for parents to do so within the charter school system.
Accountability.
The charter schools do not have to answer to parents and local school committees. So
Well-
that's the crux of the issue of number 2, is that they're looking to expand this system that has been labeled past the resolution by the NAACP and by the National Labor Relations Board, the Mass State Dems, and myriad other organizations about charter movement in Massachusetts being separate and unequal, because they are pushing out these students, and you can see it in the statistics. Overwhelmingly, the public school students take in, obviously, all students. There's a disproportionate minority that go to the charter schools, and you can't compare apples and oranges. You can't say that the charters are doing better than the public schools, because the charters are creaming the crop.
How long have these observations and studies been going on? We're talking about
For
20,
this
30
is
years?
this is a countrywide effort. New Orleans has been decimated by charters after Hurricane Katrina. The school system there is in shambles. People are organizing.
So I was in Lawrence, being the poorest community in New England. I was recently in the richest community, or one of. I won't tell you their zip code, but a fellow was very concerned about the environment and global warming, and he had a button, vote yes on 2. Do we find that there will be voters from communities that really have nothing to do? They have fine public schools, the best public schools you can imagine in Weston and Wayland and Concord, Carlisle, and so on and so forth. Can you imagine that to be some sort of a misguided noblesse oblige, saying we have great schools here. I want to see these poor communities, poor oppressed kids have good schools too.
Yeah, there is that situation, I think, but when people learn about the accountability issues and the lack of transparency within charter schools and the imposition of the state upon local communities, people quickly switch their vote.
So aside from the good-meaning people, aside from them, what else might be driving the charter school issue? Are people making money off charter schools?
Yeah, there's really questionable practices happening there. 60% of the boards are not, across the state, do not have parents on their boards in their schools. The ones that do have parents on their boards, for instance, like one in Lawrence that people revere highly, treat the parents as rubber stamps and don't really address their concerns, and they're kind of hushed up. So their pictures look great, you know what I mean? Their grades look great, but there's a repressive administration behind it. There's like questionable practices of like, you're on the board and you're running this charter school, but you also have a technology company, and that technology company has a contract with the charter school for iPads or for whatever, tablet, whatever. And that's, it's a conflict of interest. They're hiring out private contractors.
Which would not exist by definition in a public school, where an average citizen can campaign to be on the school committee. And how much longer is Lawrence in receivership now?
I think still for the next 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I forget what the
length
of time is, but it got renewed,
Okay, should have done my homework on this. But there will come a time. Now there's a situation where people can be on the public school committee and actually be pro-charter school, which seems to be a conflict.
That's if the receiver actually leaves. They could renew it again. They could take Riley out and put somebody else in. There's no, as far as I know, there's no turnaround plan for the community and the school committee to take control of the schools.
What future do you see, off the subject of charter schools, what future do you see for parent participation? Because from all I'm not an expert in any issue, but from what I understand, it's parent involvement which correlates the strongest, most positively, with the quality of the school. Even a school that's under duress and has challenged material resources, if the parents can follow their kids and speak up, you're going to find a much higher level of education.
So they're taking advantage of parents in Lawrence that work 2-3 jobs. that they do not have the time to invest themselves in their children's education, even though they love them. They're too busy paying the bills.
Well, this issue has existed for quite some time, ever since I came to, certainly when Mr. Lantigua first ran for mayor, there was a lot of talk about this, and people would come out and they'd say, hey, when I was a kid in Lawrence, yada yada, ignoring the fact that the entire curriculum and what students need to prepare themselves had totally changed. We've been talking about these things, and they talked about how parents of immigrants don't come to the schools. And then we looked a little deeper and we found out that it was forbidding for somebody to go to the school where there was likely somebody who might not speak what language it was. So it seems to me that the long-term future of Lawrence is in getting folks involved. I think you've been pretty clear about the charter school issue. I wish we had more time to talk about it. One thing I want to underline is that many of the people on I think people on both sides of the issue are trying to find a better venue for their children, and we always have to address that no matter what happens after November 8th. So here's to all of us. We hope we survive November 8th. Personally, pushing 70, I've never seen a situation like this in this country, how polarized it is. And I'm hoping through conversations like this and through efforts that Josh is making that we can find our common needs and aspirations. I want to thank Lawrence Community Action TV. In particular, I want to thank Ginny Pelletier and our producer from One World Community, Tom Gale. And I hope you tune in next. And if you would like to suggest someone to be interviewed or a topic, it's 30minutes@gmail.com. This is Ralph Galen saying thank you very much. Stay involved.